Hey YouTube, welcome to another edition of Todd Tinkers with Tech. For today's video, I wanted to show you guys a cool retro audio device. It's actually one that I still use to this day. It's old, but it does a lot of cool stuff, and I don't know, it's just an interesting product. It's this little aluminum tube right here. It's the Roku Soundbridge M1001 in this case, and it's kind of a cool device. Just wanted to dig into it a little bit. The Roku Soundbridge was introduced in August of 2003. It was Roku's second product, I believe. Their first product was a box that would let you cast your photos to your television. The first two SoundBridge products at launch were the M1000 and the M2000. The M2000 had a much larger display, but the M2000s are fairly rare. You really don't see them much at all. I occasionally browse eBay and I don't see the M2000. M1000 is a lot more common. I purchased my M1000 pretty early on. I don't remember exactly when, but I was kind of an early adopter on this device. Later devices were introduced as well, like the SoundBridge R1000, which was basically a kind of clock radio, and the M500, which was sort of a less expensive variety. I think the M1000, when it was first introduced, was about $200, and they brought the price point down to I think $99 for the M500 variation. The SoundBridge M1000 and M2000 had all the connectors underneath the end caps. So one end had the power and audio connectors, and the other end had internet connections. There was an Ethernet port and actually a Wi-Fi card port that used a laptop PCM CIA Wi-Fi card, which was kind of an interesting design. The M1000 and the M2000, and I believe the radio R1000, all had a vacuum fluorescent display. It's a really nice, bright display. It really looks good and clear to read. Unfortunately, on video, the frequency doesn't quite sync up with my camera, so I apologize for the blinkiness of it. It actually doesn't look like that in real life. It looks nice. It's a really good display. The less expensive M500 just had a regular LCD display and didn't have the brightness that the vacuum fluorescent display has. One of the big selling points when the SoundBridge was introduced is that it would allow you to play internet radio directly to your hi-fi system without having a computer. It was a standalone device that would connect to the internet and let you stream radio from the various internet radio stations that were going at the time. One of its big features for me, though, was that it would let you see your iTunes library. That was one of the biggest selling points for me. As a Mac user, over the years, I had developed a pretty big iTunes library. And I've always liked the iTunes interface for organizing playlists. I had all my CDs organized in iTunes, and I also downloaded a lot of things like DJ mixes and, live concert audio and stuff like that. And so the ability for me to access my iTunes library from different places in the house was a big selling point for me. You got to realize this was in 2003. There was really no Bluetooth audio options. There was no Spotify. It was the early days of streaming audio, and so the SoundBridge really fit the bill for what I wanted to do. So as long as I had my Mac running, I could access all my iTunes playlists and songs and everything I had in iTunes basically could access in another room. It would see my iTunes library, and it was a pretty cool thing. And actually, it still is. I still use it. One of the other cool features of the SoundBridge is that all the audio outputs are active at the same time. So for audio outputs, it has an optical digital output, it has an SPDIF digital output, and it also has an 1/8" analog output. And all those outputs are active at the same time. So for me, what I do, I have a separate amplifier going out to my outdoor speakers outside. So I route the analog output into that separate receiver that drives my outdoor speakers. And then the SPDIF I route into my receiver. So it's kind of cool being able to, utilize multiple outputs at the same time. For multiple zones, being able to send the same signal out at the same time can be cool. If you wanted to, set up 3 zones at the same time, you could have all 3 outputting simultaneously. So as well as seeing iTunes over your network, it'll also see DNLA shares. So that's convenient with any kind of server these days. Most of them will support DNLA, and it'll see your songs that way. It supports pretty much all the standard file types. Apple AAC, MP3, of course. It'll do WAV files. It'll do AIF uncompressed. It'll do WMA, Windows Media. So it'll pretty much play anything you throw at it. I've always felt that the sound quality coming out of the SoundBridge was fantastic. To my ears, it sounded great. Now, I did find an article from Stereophile magazine back in the day where they did some analytic testing on the digital to analog converter built into the device, and they basically ripped it apart and said it was pretty lousy. I don't know, maybe it's my untrained ears, but it's always sounded fantastic to me. At one point, my SoundBridge M1000 died. It just totally died. I think it may have been the display on it, the vacuum fluorescent display. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember. It was a while ago. So when that died, I went and bought 2 more, but this time it was the updated M1001 SoundBridge. The M1001 wasn't a huge change. They moved all the ports to the back of the device instead of being under the side caps, so a little more convenient that way. They also eliminated the Wi-Fi card. In this case, on the M1001, Wi-Fi was built in internally. So one caveat to using the SoundBridge in modern days is that Wi-Fi basically is not really supported. It uses an old Wi-Fi format, and it doesn't play nice with modern routers that use more faster internet connections. So for me, I've just used wired Ethernet, and that's been working great. So all the SoundBridge models came with a nice infrared remote. The device has an infrared receiver on the front of it, but it also allowed for control via your network. So that opened up some pretty cool things. You used to be able to find apps for phones to be able to control your Roku, via your phone. And that was really cool. If you're having a party or something, you could just jump on your phone and, change a playlist, change a track, change the volume, all from your phone, both Android and iOS. Unfortunately, most of those apps have gone by the wayside. The developers just haven't kept them up, and they won't run in the modern phone operating systems anymore, which is a bummer, because I really liked being able to jump on my phone and change tracks and what have you, and control my Roku that way. It still does have capabilities of control through your network, so I'm sure somebody could probably write something that could control it, either for a phone or tablet, what have you. I do have an old tablet running a really old version of Android that does allow me to run the Roku remote app, so that's one option. It's just use an old device to be able to control it. You can access the SoundBridge directly by its IP address. So what I like to do is, to figure out what IP address it's set to, use LAN scan on my Mac, do a scan of my network. That way it'll show me what the IP address is, and then you just punch the IP address into your browser and it'll bring up a page. And on that page, it allows you to configure your presets for internet radio streaming. So Roku used to have a server that it would connect to, and it had a whole library of internet radio streams, and that server went away a long time ago. But by accessing the web page directly through the IP address, you can copy and paste into the presets and set it up with internet radio streams that do work. So that's a good option. Unfortunately, because a lot of internet radio streams have changed their formats, a lot of radio streams will no longer work on the device. I did find a webpage on a discussion forum where some people gave some good tips on how to kind of reformat the URL for an internet radio station to get it to work with the SoundBridge. I believe you want it to end with the .pls. I think those are the streams that play nice. And, you might need to modify the URL that is given. So I'll put a link to this forum down below so you can access it. One of the highlights of the SoundBridge for me is the display. And these different visualizations that they have are pretty darn cool. You could have it display a clock, which is pretty boring. You could have it scroll the song name and the artist, which is also kind of boring, but then they had the cool ones. It has the option for a horizontal VU meter, has an option for a spectrum analyzer, and it has my favorite setting, which is the oscilloscope. To me, the oscilloscope just looks super cool on this thing. It's something just really, really different. You also have the option of using a small portion of the screen for the visualizer, or you can set the visualizer to be full screen. I like to set it to full screen, but sometimes you can just have it over on the side while displaying the artist and song name. So I'm not the only person to think that the Roku SoundBridge is a cool device. This year, 2024, it was inducted into the HifiHall of Fame. There's a website that details it for the HifiHall of Fame. And it also won an LF Design Award in 2008, which also was the year that the SoundBridge was completely discontinued. So even though the SoundBridge is an old, outdated device, I still think it's really cool. Its visuals are striking. The aluminum tube is just kind of a cool design with the screen on it, and it's just an interesting piece of tech that I still use and enjoy to this day. I certainly use Spotify probably more than the SoundBridge, but there's something cool to be able to pull up your iTunes library. And the fact is, I have a lot of stuff in my iTunes library, like long form DJ mixes, things I've pulled down off the internet over the years that you just can't get on Spotify that are in my iTunes library. And the SoundBridge allows me to access them on my receiver easily. So thanks for watching this video about the Roku SoundBridge, and do me a favor, leave your comments and give it a like if you don't mind, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Appreciate it.